Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome back to another episode of the Saturdays in Stores podcast brought to you right here on the Crossover Media Network. My name is Kanaye and today we have really bad loss and a somewhat encouraging win to talk about. Of course, last Sunday, UConn got absolutely routed at Madison Square Garden against the Johnnies. Really tough loss where they did make it interesting at one point in the second half, where they kind of cut it down to 9, and you thought, okay, maybe there's a chance UConn can try to make it a little tough on St. John's to be able to close out the win for them later in this late stretch of that game. But obviously that isn't what ended up happening. But they were able to turn around on Wednesday night at the XL Center against Georgetown. Probably their best offensive performance, I'd say, in a really long time. But I think that was definitely a good get back on track type of win to set them up as they head up to the dunk on Saturday to play Providence, which is definitely a game where you can't lose, but it could definitely get a little tricky for UConn if they don't come out hot. But before we get into that, if you like this podcast, if you like any of the other content you see on this channel, please subscribe, tell other people about it. It all helps with YouTube's algorithm. Additionally, please like the videos, and we really like seeing what you guys have to say in the comments below. So please give us your takes. We like seeing what you guys have to say about whatever it is we might be talking about. So let's get into the St. John's game. UConn lost 89-75. It was a game that I didn't necessarily expect UConn to come out and be able to win the game in. Just with, I think the game against St. John's at Gamble Pavilion was the one that they needed to win in this series. And I just felt that once they lost that game at Gamble, St. John's was more than likely probably going to come out of the season series with a sweep. And that's what they ended up doing. It's the first time they swept UConn in a Big East regular season in 25 years, I believe I saw. So really just, me and Josh talked about it on the podcast we did earlier this week, that episode about how just everything Rick Pitino's done with St. John's. It's just really incredible to see what he's done to revive that program and bring a presence in the college basketball world back to New York City. And how, he should lead the Coach of the Year race right now with just everything he's done, the insane turnaround he's had, not only at St. John's, but every other school he's coached at. He's definitely, he has to be, I think, a top 3 coach of all time. And I know most of you guys on the who watch the channel know that I'm not. I hate, I can't stand Duke. So I can't give in and say Krzyzewski's my go. I think I give that to Pitino. But I think most people probably would call Coach K the go, which I have no argument against. I just simply, other than my hate for Duke, I can't say he's the go. But yeah, again, Rick Pitino, just what he's done at St. John's. Even last year, they got better as the year went on, and they really should have made the tournament. I understand NC State ended up winning the ACC and ultimately probably stole a bid or two. The Big East was a victim of probably 2 or 3 bid stealers. NC State specifically definitely stole a bid for the Big East for sure. And it's unfortunate because he should have been in the dance last year, and he's going to be this year. And they definitely, if they could shoot the ball if they could shoot the ball the way they shot it against UConn on Sunday, then they're a Final Four team. In my eyes, I don't see why they can't make the Final Four if they shoot like that come March. But just to talk a little bit more about what actually went down in the game, UConn actually got out to a really hot start. Sol was able to get going pretty quick. He had want to say 1 or 2 big threes, maybe to get to the basket. McNeely was able to get to the line a little bit here and there. I think Sampson also kind of was able to get off to a little bit of a hot start in that game as well. But kind of like the game at Gamble, both times UConn was able to get out to a hot start, make some good shots, and then kind of as the game settled in a little bit and St. John's was able to lock in on the defensive end, it really made UConn struggle. They really could not get into their sets whatsoever at all. St. John's just did a great job running solo ball off the 3-point line. They were really able to blow up a lot of their ball screens and pin downs and just a lot of the actions that UConn was trying to run. And I think a lot of that had to do with Hassan Diarra being in foul trouble really early in the game. He picked up his second foul really quick. I want to say it might have been at the might have came a little bit before the under 16 timeout, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe after. I can't totally remember, but yeah, they put it UConn in a position where they had to play Aiden Mahaney for a little bit, and obviously Aiden Mahaney hasn't really brought much this year, and they kind of threw Armando well into the fire there for a little bit. They had him play. He played 8 minutes in the game, primarily in the first half, but I think that was tough. I understand Hassan was in foul trouble. We kind of didn't really have any other direction to go in terms of who was going to run the point. But just I think I would have liked to see Emmanuel maybe get more minutes in previous games leading up to that than just simply throwing him out into the fire when it was still a close game when he subbed in for Hassan. But I just think to throw a freshman to the fire like that in a game of that magnitude was probably not the best situation for Ahmad to be in, and you could tell he was getting pressured immediately as soon as he crossed half court. St. John's, I think, saw there was a freshman ball handler in the game. They're going to go up and they're going to pressure him and make him uncomfortable, try to force him to make inadvertent decisions, and I think he very much looked like a freshman when he in those minutes he played. And I mean, it is what it is. He hasn't played very much this year, especially not in really big moments where he's can't make a mistake. So it's tough. I think if Hassan's not on the floor, then this team is really dysfunctional on offense. And it gets to be a tough watch at times for sure. Um, I do want to talk a little bit about Alex Karaban in this game. I know he struggled a lot leading up to this game against St. John's, but I think it was really, really encouraging to see him knock down those three straight threes in the second half, which kind of was on during that UConn run to cut the lead to 9 points and kind of get them in a position where they could have made the game a little bit more tight down the stretch and possibly been able to maybe go on a run to tie the game. But I think what was more nice, I think what was more encouraging to see, other than those three threes going down, for Alex being able to finally see the ball through the net, was when Kadari Richmond makes a layup on the fast break, I want to say, and they push the ball up the court, and Karaban pulls up with 25 seconds left on the shot clock from probably 35 feet out, deep three off the dribble, just a pull-up three. And, I thought it was a good look. I didn't hate the shot selection at all, and I think that was a good indicator of Alex starting to get his confidence back, which this team really, really needs and has missed completely ever since Liam McNeely went down with injury, to be honest with you. I mean, I've talked about a lot how when Liam went down, Alex moved up in the scouting report. He didn't get the favorable matchups of playing against natural fours, and he had to play against more athletic wings and natural threes that Liam normally drew the assignment for. And I just think Alex Karaban had a little bit of a tough time being kind of the number one option, go-to guy-esque type of that's just not his archetype. He's not that type of player, and I think he was put in that position, and he's just not comfortable being there. And I think just with the confidence issues of him moving up in the scouting report, him not getting the looks that he got when Liam was playing, and him being asked to do a little bit more than what he's comfortable with, and kind of not living up to that, and kind of, I think he believes in it. I mean, he has tanked his NBA stock a lot in the 6 weeks he played without Liam being on the floor, and I think that's also attributed to you could also attribute a lot of that to why Alex has struggled. I think, he came back to school to become a first round pick, and in the early stretch of the year, I say he did. He was proving that he is worth being a late first round pick for a contending team. So to come in and obviously not be a star or anyone who's going to give you 20 plus on any given night, but he's going to be able to come in and contribute right away. But I think in the stretch where Liam wasn't healthy and Alex, again, moved up on the scouting report, was kind of the number one option, he struggled a lot. And I think it's definitely hurt his draft stock tremendously. And I think it's even made it to the point where you could question whether he does end up going to the NBA at the end of the season or if he ends up coming back for his senior year at UConn. So that's going to be something to watch out for in the future. I'm going to touch a little bit more on that later in the episode today. But yeah, I think seeing him take that shot was, again, just really, really good to see kind of the confidence coming back. That was a very vintage Alex Karaban type of shot where he's taking these deep transition threes that are kind of just backbreakers for the opposing team's defense, and I think that was really nice to see. He didn't shoot great against Georgetown, but no, I'll get into that in the Georgetown recap coming up very soon. But yeah, I mean, I think it is good to see Alex start to get his confidence back because realistically, this team is going to go on any sort of run in March. You're going to need Alex to show up, and it's been tough for him this last month and a half, 2 months. But I think hopefully, come March, and now considering that Liam's back and he's been playing really well, I think hopefully that'll help. But outside of AK, I think the only other player really worth noting was Tarris Reed in this game. Tarris Reed played with a lot of toughness. I really think St. John's completely outmatched UConn just with the level of tenacity and toughness they played with. They were there they beat UConn on every loose ball. They just looked like they wanted to win the game more than UConn. And this was a game that, again, I talk about this team not having a killer instinct all the time. They just kind of aren't able to get up for a lot of games, but I thought maybe this was a game that they were going to be able to get up for, considering you're playing a top 10 team on the road. That would boost your resume tremendously, one that's really gotten weak, considering how bad Baylor's been this year, as well as Gonzaga. And Marquette also struggling as well. And with that, Marquette went on the road, being one of your better resume wins this year. But again, they came out hot. I thought maybe it was going to be a pretty tight, good game, but they just kind of they couldn't keep up with St. John's, and just the toughness and the defense that St. John's plays with. It's incredible. Again, a lot of credit goes to Rick Pitino and his players. It really is incredible to see just what he's done with the guys he has. I mean, from year one, year two of Pitino coaching Zuby Ejiofor and RJ Lewis, it's incredible to see how much those two players have grown. I mean, RJ Lewis, a guy last year who saw limited minutes off the bench, is now one of their best players and could end up being the Big East Player of the Year. Zuby Ejiofor, a guy who, kind of a slow start in his career at Kansas. And then, again, another guy who saw limited action off the bench last year for St. John's is now one of the premier big men in the Big East this season. And he played a really good game too. And I also think just what he's done with Kadari Richmond and kind of reworking the shot. Again, Kadari's still not a great shooter. But on top of that, I feel like Rick Pitino really, really was the perfect match or the perfect guy to get Kadari Richmond where he's kind of always needed to go as a college player. I think Jim Boeheim talked a little bit about how he had kind of, effort concerns with Kadari. Shaheen Holloway, I know at times he talked about it too. But I think Rick Pitino, just with his really old school style, he's showing that being an old school style coach still works, and being able to develop your players and really get them where they need to be. I mean, the conditioning that he puts his guys through, Kadari's probably been in the best shape of his college career this season. And I just think what he's done for Kadari Richmond, getting him to play with the tenacity, and I think the effort that people always said, wow, I mean, you just see the talent that a guy like Kadari has, and you think to yourself, I mean, dude, if this guy put in 110% every single game or like 100% of the time, that he could be so good. And I think we're finally starting to see some of that. I know the numbers are a little bit more down from last year, what he did at Seton Hall, but I think, last year he was really the guy at Seton Hall, but this year he's kind of sharing the mantle with the likes of RJ Lewis, Zuby Ejiofor, Davon Smith, Simeon Wilcher, and I think, his all-around game, I think, and his mentality is definitely bettered compared to where it was at last year. But to get back to UConn, again, Tarris Reed, I think, was really the only one who played with any toughness in that game at the Garden. I just think he really has made it to a point where I question why he still does not start for this team. I'd like to think that Tarris Reed in almost every game this year has outplayed Samson Johnson. Probably forgetting one or two games off the top of my head where Samson played a little bit better than Tarris. But yeah, I mean, the mistakes are still there that Tarris makes. He makes the wrong read a lot of times, or maybe he has a bad turnover, or is able to finish a shot that he should around the rim. But you see the talent that's there, and he's had the games to prove it against, Georgetown. I'm going to get into that. He played really, really well in that game, and he played really well against St. John's as well. And I just think in the Big East, Samson Johnson, I just don't know if he's necessarily a starting caliber center in the Big East. Really, and I just don't know if he ever was. I understand Dan wants to stay loyal to his players. And I respect Dan a lot for being that way. But I think sometimes that loyalty kind of ends up hurting the team more than anything else. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that coming to this episode. But yeah, Tarris Reed, really great game for him against St. John's. I mean, 15 points, was able to add 6 rebounds, 5 for 8 from the floor. Just really good stuff out of the 20 minutes he played. So yeah, and I mean, outside of that, Liam McNeely, I mean, he played tough. It's not like he wasn't trying out there. I think he also played with a lot of will and just hard out there. But he didn't shoot the ball really well at all. 2 for 13, 0 for 6 from three. So definitely not what you want to see out of Liam. But I mean, I just think when UConn isn't making, when you got guys who aren't making shots like Liam or Solo, I mean, it really hurts. And they really don't have much at all going on offense, which is something that definitely needs to be addressed going into next season. So I think that pretty much takes care of everything I had to take away from this St. John's game. Of course, really tough loss. Would have been a huge opportunity to really build up your resume if they were able to come out with that win. Of course, it's not what happened, but they were able to bounce back against Georgetown on Wednesday night at the XL Center in Hartford. On a positive note, UConn did go undefeated at the XL Center this year, so that's nice to see. A little strange. You would have thought that they'd go undefeated at Gamble rather than the XL, but 2 losses at Gamble. Hope we don't add another against Marquette on, I want to say, Tuesday or Wednesday this upcoming week. So yeah, definitely need to win that game at Gamble and hopefully get the season sweep against Marquette, because that would be put UConn in an ideal spot. But yeah, so against Georgetown, UConn won 93-79. First blowout win for UConn in quite a while. It really does feel like a really long time since UConn is really able to comfortably win a game by a double-digit margin, and it's where it really wasn't. I mean, even in this game, in the early stretches, UConn went down 14-4, and I was worried a little bit. I mean, I was at the game in Hartford at the XL, and I was wondering, oh, geez, man, I really thought maybe the St. John's game, just the negative energy from that game and that showing in that game, just we're gonna carry on through the rest of the season to really hurt UConn and their chances of winning the remainder of the Big East games. But thankfully, they were able to get back on track. And then after going down 14-4, a lot of that is attributed to Solo Ball. I think Solo Ball was really underrated in this game in terms of the media coverage after. Hit some really big shots, really important threes he hit. He went 4 for 10 from three in the game. Again, knocked out some really big shots. There was one where he pulled from pretty far out, missed, and then he got the rebound, kicked it back out to him. He had a really big shot, I think, to cut the lead. I mean, to build the lead up to double digits at one point in the game. On top of that, Lee McNeely, really good game from him as well. 5 for 10 from the floor, 3 for 6 from three. So 17 points, added additional 4 assists too. So that was really good to see Liam get back on track after his rough shooting performance against St. John's. But I really do think the star of the night was Tarris Reed Jr. once again. I mean, again, it really does kind of frustrate, I think, a lot of Husky fans seeing that Tarris Reed continues to not start in these games. And it's kind of got to the point where, okay, what else does Tarris Reed need to do to be able to start for this team? And the reality is, I just don't know if he ever will this year. Again, going back to Dan's loyalty, I just think he feels indebted to Sampson, of a guy who's been with the program for 4 years and, is a back-to-back national champion, came back for his senior year and has done all the right things that you've asked him to. And I mean, he deserves to start. I want Tarris Reed to start too, don't get me wrong, but you can't say Sampson doesn't deserve to start with everything he's done for the program. And while I don't think that is best for the team, I think the coaching staff does realize that Tarris Reed at this point in the year is the better center. And I think that was perfectly seen in this Georgetown game where Sampson did start, but he only played 13 minutes as opposed to Tarris Reed's 27. Now, I do think this was a favorable matchup for Tarris, considering that Thomas Sorber, Georgetown star freshman center, is out for the year. That's a guy who probably could have been a lottery pick and potentially Big East freshman of the year and could still end up winning that award, although I think Liam coming back and playing the way he has ever since he has come back is probably going to be enough for Liam to win Big East freshman of the year. However, I just think Drew Fielder and I forget the other center's name. I just don't think those guys aren't going to be tough enough to. They're not big enough to be able to keep up with the physicality that Tarris Reed brings. But I mean, still, outside of his post, where when the opportunities he got in the post to score, he was able to get out in off of a steal in the fast break and go down coast to coast and dunk it. I mean, those are things that I mean, I don't think you really expect to see out of Tarris Reed, and things that Adonis Sanogo even really wasn't doing when he played at UConn, even in his really, really good junior season, which really, really excites me for next year and what we could potentially be seeing out of Tarris Reed if he comes back, which I think he should for his senior season. And I'm just really excited to see what Tarris Reed, the possibilities of what Tarris Reed could be next year. So definitely good on Tarris for how he played in that game. Just really nice performance. And I hope he's able to continue that throughout the course, the rest of Big East play and heading into the Big East tournament and March Madness. But other than that, I think Hassan Diarra was pretty solid in this game. Probably his best game I think he has had ever since he has been struggling with the knee issue. Again, I'm little, it's kind of been up in the air. No one really knows for sure what exactly Haas is dealing with. I heard tendonitis and then arthritis. There, a lot of people are throwing lots of things back and forth, so I'm not fully certain on what exactly when he suffered that injury and what exactly was. But I definitely think he played well in this game. 14 points, 7 assists, 2 steals, just what you like to see out of Haas and what you, I think, have come to expect from him at this point, other than that kind of rough stretch after he was dealing with the knee issue. I also thought Jalen Stewart was, I like the minutes he played in this game. I'd like to see him get a little bit more involved on offense. I'd like to see some more plays drawn up for him. I just think now, well, yes, you are kind of playing to try to make a little bit of noise in March. I do also think you need to start playing your roster in preparation for next year. I think you need to give guys like Tarris Reed, Jalen Stewart, 2 guys who I think you need to prioritize bringing back along with solo ball going into next season. I think you need to really play those guys as much as you can just to see kind of what you have there. I think Jaden Ross as well, probably should get some runs here and there just to kind of see a little bit more of what you have out of him, because I think if Jaden Ross is able to take if he shows signs of being able to take a leap over the summer, of being able to become that really legit 3-and-D type of player, then that's something that's definitely going to help, considering that you won't have to go into the portal and try and find a guy that caliber. But of course, he kind of hasn't shown up to this point. That might end up being something that the staff looks out for in the portal going to next year. But I think at this point in the season, you really kind of have to play to your strengths. I know Rob Doster in the Top Dogs podcast talked about it a little bit. I mean, everyone knows at this point, everyone around college basketball knows this isn't a good defensive team really at all. And with Lee McNeely healthy, I mean, they were up to, before he got hurt against DePaul, they were a top 5 KenPom offense. So I think you really need to play just towards your strength. You need to bank on being a team that can go out and score 90 plus on anyone on any given night. And I think, of course, you need to still bring intensity on the defensive side of the ball. But, don't just let people score or anything of that sort. But I think you really need to focus on being able to win games by scoring as much as you possibly can. Kind of similar to what we saw out of Alabama last year when they won on their Final Four run, just how explosive they were with Mark Sears and all their shooters, Aaron Estrada, Rylan Griffin when they had them, Grant Nelson as well. And I just think you need to look out Latrell Wrightsell. I think you really need to bank on hoping to see some sort of performance out of this UConn team that sort of imitates what we saw out of Alabama going into the tournament last year. And I mean, they needed to, because I mean, going into Providence, it's not going to be, without Bryce Hopkins, they're not really a great team at all. They've struggled a lot in Big East play, and it's really unfortunate to see, because they've just been so injury ridden the last 2 seasons. I mean, you consider last year how well Devin Carter played for them. Devin Carter played at an All-American level, was the Big East Player of the Year, and Providence was just such a fun team that got robbed of getting a tournament spot. I mean, I still will I will always forever hate the committee for robbing us of being able to see Devin Carter play in the tournament with Providence. Just, I mean, that was a guy who was fully capable of becoming a March Madness legend, just with had the potential there to explode for 30 on any given night. I mean, he was just so fun to watch last year. I mean, say Hopkins doesn't go down with the ACL tear at the beginning of the season, or the beginning of Big East play, I should say. I mean, Providence, you could talk about being a second weekend Final Four possible caliber team, just with what they had with Josh Oduro and Ticket Gaines. They had a really solid squad last year. And this year, not really as much, but you know, the state of Rhode Island hates, specifically Friartown, hates Dan Hurley. I'm sure the beverages are going to be flowing on Saturday, and it's going to be a really rowdy environment. It's going to get loud in the dunk, and it's a game that UConn, again, cannot roll over. They need to show up and they need to come out hot, because they lose that game. I get it's a road game in the Big East, but it's not going to be a good loss. It's probably going to end up being a quad Q3, possibly Q4 loss. So you definitely can't. You can't lose the game, and I do think this matchup does favor UConn, just in terms of them kind of playing defensively the same way Creighton does, where they kind of try to funnel you in towards the paint, and they don't necessarily try to force turnovers the way that St. John's and maybe a Marquette does. But I definitely think that's going to benefit guys like Hassan Diar and Liam McNeely, who are going to be able to get into those 2-on-1 actions where they're going to the lane and being able to make a decision of whether to dump it down low to the big or go up with it themselves. So you saw what Liam was able to do against Creighton against that sort of a defense. And you saw in the second half against Providence at Gamble Pavilion what Hassan was able to do, and really probably what was his best game as a Husky, I would like to argue. But yeah, again, Providence went up 16 points at one point in that game, and definitely made it really, really concerning going to the half for the Huskies in that game. So definitely a team, when you let get hot, could hurt you, but UConn can't. They need to come out and get up for the game. They can't just roll over the way they did against Seton Hall. They can't come out laxed or asleep. They need to come with full intensity. And that's what they got to do for the remainder of Big East play, because I think it's right now you kind of sitting around the 8 to 9 line seeding wise, and I think you really need them to try to get to a 7-10. I would think in order to get to a 7 seed, they probably have to win out and also probably go far in the Big East tournament, more than likely have to make the Big East tournament championship and potentially even win it to get to that 7 seed line. Say they lose 1 to 2 more games, they might fall to that 10 seed. And I honestly do think the 7-10 seed lines will end up being a lot better for UConn if they get that draw than the 8-9. I think if you're on the 7-10 line, then you won't draw having to play 1 seed in the second round, which is obviously ideal for this UConn team, because I really do not think UConn has any realistic chance against the likes of Auburn, Duke, Florida, or I'm forgetting off the top of my head who else is in the running for a 1 seed as of right now. But yeah, I think they have a lot better of a chance faring up against the likes of a Tennessee and Alabama, or someone else on that 2 seed line. Arizona might get up to that point too. I just think matchup wise, it's a lot better if UConn were to draw one of those teams if they end up on the 7-10, rather than having to play a 1 seed if they get the 8-9 where they are right now. So in a way, you want to win out, you want to win the Big East tournament. But I do think if they end up going 2-2 in this 4-game stretch to come, or not mistake, there's only 3 games left. If they come out of this 3-game stretch with 1 or 2 more losses, I don't necessarily know if that's the actual worst thing for them to happen, because if they drop to the 10 seed line, I do think that ends up faring for them a lot better than right now at the 8-9. So, on top of that, it's just, again, I think it really comes back to UConn really having to bank on being just a really good offensive team, because their defense is not what's going to be able to get them into the second weekend. And I do think if they are able to make the second weekend, you have to write up the season as a success. It's just, I understand you had the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity of being able to go for the 3P, and I think it was a failure in being able to build a roster to be able to do that. I think a lot of, I fell victim to it too. I think a lot of the hype which surrounded this roster going to here was just, okay, you have Dan Hurley, who's gonna, you know, is the best coach in America. I'd still argue that way, of course, as a UConn fan. With the best coaching staff in the country, Luke Murray, Kanaye Young, just everything they drop offensively. The recruiting they've done in the past few years. I mean, obviously this year they missed on a few guys, but it's shown that they've got a really good track record in terms of who they were able to hit on in the transfer portal and as freshmen, and in terms of their freshman recruits. On top of that, of course, Alex Caravan coming back, I think was definitely added a lot to the hype. But, at the end of the day, I think going into the season, there were concerns that I had. I thought they were going to be a lot better than what they've shown up to this point this year. But I talked about it. I worried a lot about the size of the backcourt with Hassan Yar, Aiden Mahaney, Solo Ball not being as big as what we had last year with Cam Spencer, Tristan Newton, Steph Castle, all guys that were 6'4" plus. And really, looked like men out there rather than, some of the guys we have on the team this year, which is not a slight to them in any way. Just, it's just they're different types of players, different archetypes. And, I think just it's tough because, again, you have the opportunity to go for the three-peat, something that hasn't been done since the Wooden era at UCLA. But I think considering what this roster ended up being and what we've seen from this team this year, I think you can't walk out of the season disappointed if they are able to make it into that second weekend. I even say if they're able to make it a competitive game going into the second round, I think that would more than likely be, I think you'd have to write it up as a success in my eyes because, realistically, this roster isn't the greatest, for being completely honest. So, yeah. And then in terms of going into next year, again, I do think the coach staff is kind of realizing that this year, you're probably not going to be in contention to make a Final Four, and you kind of need to start playing guys with the intentions of watching them grow going into next year. And I think in terms of three guys who I really would like to see the coaching staff do absolutely everything in their power to keep in the program, it's Solo Ball, Tarris Reed, and Jalen Stewart. I just think with what you've seen out of Solo Ball and Tarris Reed this year, it's evident there's a lot of talent there. They do need a little bit more fine-tuning Solo Ball with being able to attack closeouts a little bit more, play better defense. He's a guy who I think has no excuse to not be a better defender than what he is. And I think he can get to that point if he's able to come back to school and stay with this UConn program for another year. Of course, you already know how good he is as a shooter, what he brings as arguably the best three-point shooter in the country. But I think, just being able to attack closeouts more, being able to kind of create his own shot, do a little bit more off the dribble, kind of get into the lane, draw some more fouls, get other guys involved as a facilitator. Those are just areas of improvement I'd like to see Solo Ball grow in. Tarris Reed, again, the physical makeup is there. The talent and natural ability are both there. And I just think a lot of it is the mental aspect of the game that needs to improve on, making the right reads, making the right decisions, being able to hit more of you, be a little bit more consistent at the line and actually finish on some of the and one opportunities he's missed on this year. I think he's a guy who really can end up being possibly even better than Adam Sanogo if he continues to watch that Sanogo tape the way that he's talked about the coaching staff has had him do, as well as just, what we've seen this year. He's had some really, really strong showings in a lot of games. He's had a lot of 20 and 10 games, or at least double-doubles in general, and I think that's a guy who I'm really, really excited to see next year. And, Jalen Stewart, a guy who, I think I would have liked to see a little bit more out of up to this point. But he's had flashes like against Villanova in that loss at Finner and Pavilion, or in the first half against Memphis at the Maui Invitational where he scored 16. In the early stretches of the games against Marquette and St. John's at Gamble, he got so hot. Marquette, he had 3 straight threes to start the game. St. John's, he really lit it up early on. And that's a guy who I think is so talented on the offensive end of the basketball. If you can get him to become a little bit of more of a better defender, and I think try to get him to be a little bit more consistent in some of his reads and decision-making aspect of the game on the offensive side, then I think that's a guy who could be really, really good and definitely an all Big East caliber player possibly next season. In terms of other guys on the roster, I know I mentioned earlier that Alex Caravan, the NBA question is probably going to be up in the air once again this offseason. I think it's probably going to end up faring the same way to the last year, where it kind of comes down to the deadline to either to stay in the draft after the combine or to come back to school. Realistically, if Alex comes back, I don't think that's the worst thing, but I really just don't know how much more he benefits from another year of college basketball. I think, if he can get anything similar to the deals he was probably getting offered last year, where he gets a two-way where some of the contract is guaranteed, then I think he should probably take it. I think up to this point, there's really nothing more that I think coming back to school would really benefit him with in terms of him being able to grow and kind of better his game. And I think it is kind of time. I'd like to see Jalen Stewart, I think, get handed over the reins to kind of be the starting wing. We're kind of like the go-to wing on this roster. In terms of the freshman class incoming next year, I think that none of those guys are going to be the caliber of a player that we've seen with out of the 2 5-stars last 2 years with like Steph Castle or Liam McNeely this year. Liam's definitely gone, I'd like to think. It's unfortunate because that's a guy who I think whose game is perfectly suited for college basketball, maybe even more so than the NBA. But that's a kid who I don't think you're going to be able to keep in STORRS for more than a year. Just with the performances he's had this year, he's probably the best player on the team, and I don't think anyone would argue with you if you're to say that. He's probably going to end up being a top 10 pick, if not top 10 in the lottery for sure. And it sucks because if he does come back, he's a guy who could definitely be first team All-American, potential Wooden Award candidate. With how much I think his game is so well suited for college basketball. But again, he's probably gone. It's, wish Liam luck, of course. Just a great year he had here in STORRS, and it's not over yet either. So you could definitely add to the lore of his freshman year at UConn if he comes out and has a strong showing in the Big East tournament and in the tour in March Madness. So really hope to see that. But in terms of freshmen coming in next year, they are. I don't think any of them again are really kind of the caliber of player Steph Castle or Liam is. I think those are all guys that are probably going to end up staying 2 to 3 years. Probably the one that has the best chance to be one and done is Eric Ryby. I'd like to think just with what he brings as a center or potential power forward. I know the coach Steph's talked about playing him at the 4. So I'm definitely excited to see that. But I definitely think the staff needs to go all in on getting an absolute stud of a point guard in the portal. Adam Haney was a miss. I didn't think they were going to be bringing him in to play the point, but that's obviously what ended up happening, and it didn't work out. And I do feel for Aiden, a guy who really doesn't play anymore. He just buried on the bench, a guy who you brought in to kind of be one of the stars this year, and it just ultimately didn't pan out. And that's the risk you take when you go after these mid-major guys. You never know how they're going to end up playing once they get to the high major level. Like last year, we saw UConn originally wanted Nick Timberlake, and they, for a lot of people, including myself, thought UConn was going to land Nick Timberlake, my mistake. And then he ended up playing in Lawrence for Bill Self. And he obviously didn't end up playing that well the last season. He only averaged around 4 points a game, a guy who a lot of people thought was going to be a star out of the portal. UConn was recipient of a blessing in disguise with that. Missing out on Nick Timberlake, they got Cam Spencer. We all know how good Kill Cam was last year. So, I definitely think, the portal, Turley talks about how he thinks he's found the formula. While I don't necessarily disagree with him, I do think there maybe is no exact formula you can really bank on working in this current era of college basketball with the transfer portal. I think a lot of it is you step up to the plate, and sometimes you're going to swing and miss, and sometimes you're going to hit a home run. And last year they hit a home run with Cam Spencer. This year I think they missed on Aiden and maybe got hit it with Tarris. So I definitely think they need to address the point guard situation next year, just because I don't know if Ahmad Noah is going to be ready to be that caliber of point guard that UConn needs going to next year. If he could be somewhat similar to what Hassan was for UConn last year, I think that would more than likely be ideal for this program. I'd like to think Jaden Ross more than likely returns next year as well. But this is a lot of offseason talk that I'll get into once the season does actually end up finishing, whenever that is. Hopefully not for a while. Hopefully we go on a run in March. That would be nice to see. But I think that pretty much takes care of everything I had to say for this episode. Really, at this point, I think you kind of have to bank on the fact that this UConn team has by no means played their best game of the season yet, I think. I really am kind of banking on the idea that at some point it has to click. I think as a fan, you just think like there's got to be a point where just everything clicks, everything goes right for UConn in a game where more than one guy is having a hot night, like where it's not just solo ball going off or Liam McNeely going nuclear like the way he did at Creighton, or again going back to solo what he did at Marquette, and they're able to get stops when they need to, and guys are actually able to hit shots. AK's shooting with confidence, Liam's knocking down threes, Hassan isn't turning the ball over, Tarris is dealing scoring in the post. I just think there's definitely the room to go on there definitely is the potential to go on a run in March, but I think you really do have to bank on kind of the fact of UConn being a really, really explosive offensive team. Really, again, kind of hoping for solo ball and Liam McNeely, AK, those guys going just nuclear in the tournament. And, there is a world where that happens, but there is also very much a world where UConn loses in the first round. So I think you need to prepare yourself for either possibility. But again, I think that pretty much takes care of everything I had to say for this episode today. Please, as always, if you like this podcast or anything else you see on the Crossover channel, subscribe, tell other people about it. It really helps with the algorithm on YouTube. And until the next episode, I'll see you all next time.